a lot of naive salesmen ignore them. I always see it as an opportunity to fix a problem.
Do you think there's an art to sales? Is it a thing of beauty when you get it right?
You're always looking what I call over the horizon selling.
So it sounds like you had a pretty well-developed sense of your targets. You knew who you wanted to sell to.
I'd say that the average life expectancy of a new business salesman in most of the companies I work for is 1 or 2 years.
That's better. Okay, so you recovered from your ski holiday?
Yeah, recovered very much from the skiing all day. It's always tough at our age on your knees, I find.
At least your knees and your liver when we go skiing.
Liver, is...
more right arm exercise than the legs sometimes. Yeah. It seems like an awful long time ago already, though.
It's nearly a week and a half. Get it on for 2 weeks, I think. It feels like just yesterday.
And then we started planning next year's one already.
That's it. Well, there is another trip, as you know, going just before Christmas, I think, which sounds a bit more dramatic.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll have to start planning for that. So as listeners will soon find out, we tend to share a ski holiday every year as well. And we do some fitness training together as well. And I thought, about time I got you on the podcast.
Oh, yeah, well, thanks for inviting me. I think the fitness training is the key because that's going to give me life longevity. It's going to make me live longer and live happier, apparently. So
is that a promise?
Yeah.
Great.
Lifting weights is the answer, apparently, at our age.
So, okay, everybody listening, people of a certain age, lifting weights. Cardio is good, but you've got to do the resistance stuff as well, haven't you?
Very much so. And like you say, both the weights and the VO2 max, very important. When you get to my stage in life, you listen to a lot of podcasts about how you're going to live longer.
You're pretty good on your diet as well, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're very strict on that, what you do and don't eat, no ultra-processed foods and all that.
Well, you've got to put it all together in one picture. There's no elixir of life, sadly.
Well, it sounds like you got it cracked. You're doing all the right things.
Hopefully.
Good. Well, let's get some tips and advice from you in a minute then, and we'll do that in the shape of a podcast. Hello and welcome again to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow Limited, where every week we try and come up with something useful, interesting, humorous, or just downright daft for owners and managers of small and medium-sized enterprises. This is episode 113, and we're very lucky this week because Richard's away. No, I didn't mean it to sound like that. We're very lucky this week because we've got Steve in as a guest. Steve Arnold, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
That's great. It's nice to have you in. Richard's away skiing this week himself. He's off in Andorra. Glorious conditions, I'm led to believe. So.
I've never been there, actually. So that
no, me neither. I've not skied there either. So no doubt next week when he's back, we'll be hearing all of his tales from skiing there with his family. So we'll do that. So welcome along to the podcast. Today's episode is going to be about your reflections from a career in sales. You're now retired, but you've got a whole career's worth of stories behind you. So I'm looking forward to getting into some of that. As tradition dictates, though, we will start the podcast with a quick review of our last 3 episodes. So listeners who are coming into this one can maybe have a think about other ones they want to go for and go and have a look. So this is episode 113. And over the last couple, I've been teasing Richard with trying to come up with something interesting about the number of the episode each week. I'm not sure how long this is going to last for because I've got a feeling we might run out of things to say. So episode 113, apparently the number 113 is a joke in all the Pixar films, which I didn't know. It's funny what you can find out on the old Google. Whenever they have like a number plate on a car or a model number on a camera or someone's identity badge, they always use the number 113. And it's because all the animators that work for Pixar studied at the same university in California, and they studied in room 113.
Yeah, right. Very
so
strange. There you go. I'll write that down and say
write that down. Richard now normally takes the mick at me at that point for taking us somewhat off-piste on the subject at hand. So what were our last ones? Well, last week was episode 112, where we talked about our reflections 5 years on from COVID. And have we already forgotten some of those lessons that back then we said, we better do that differently? So everything from making sure you got cash reserves, communications well, you diversified your product and your supply chain and all that stuff. So that was quite interesting. 111 was the week before that, and that was about customer experience, saying that don't think that this sales is all about just winning the customer and then forgetting them. You got to make sure that the experience of being a customer is also a very positive experience for the customer. Otherwise, all that work you've done to win them, and they don't hang around for very long, and they certainly wouldn't cross-promote you or refer you. And then before that, episode 110 was the difference between selling if you work for a small company and a large company. and they've each got their own pros and cons, and they can each learn from each other. But we thought we'd sort of talk about that a little bit. And then only because Richard was moaning a couple of weeks ago that he was no longer able to refer to 108, which he had a bit of a thing for. We only talk about the last 3 and it's slipped off. We said, okay, every week then, why don't we come up with a random episode from the archives just to tell everybody about. So I chose episode 79 from last summer. And that was talking about the UK, is it facing a recruitment shift? Everyone seems to be talking very differently about recruitment, not recruiting as much, automating more, outsourcing, all that stuff. So we talked about that back in episode 79. But anyway, that brings us today, 113, and we've got Steve here. And the reason I wanted to tap into your experience is because you've worked for quite a lot of different companies, a lot of really big companies, you know, the Cisco's and the Hewlett-Packards of this world, as well as other companies that maybe aren't so much household names, in software sales as well as other sales, and you're even helping businesses now today, aren't you, with their sales? So having retired, I thought, right, you can be more honest than nearly anyone else we'll speak to, because you can just reflect on a whole career's worth of experiences.
Well, thanks. Yeah, and those experiences, there's only 3 things people buy, all right? People buy the person that's selling to them, the products or service, and the organisation they're buying it from.
In that order?
That depends on how big the organisation is.
Right.
So a big organisation like BP, you know, you never got sacked for buying IBM in the technology. So it doesn't matter what the salesman or the person who's fronting up does or says, because they're going to buy from IBM because they expect the product or service, and then the service level after that is going to.
Would you say then, for a big company like that, would you say that the company reputation for the big company would even trump another competitor product that's better?
Yep.
Yeah.
So it depends on the buyers, because obviously it's usually more than one person involved in the process. There's usually a committee. So it could be the project manager has found exactly the right solution and he wants that one, but then the operations director knows that company can't deliver, so he wants to go for another one. Yeah. Because actually a successful delivery of a software package like a CRM package or an SAP type package is key. The success of the project is the key. Whether it's got a certain bit of functionality or not is actually not as important.
So if you're going in and you're trying to be a disruptor and stealing a bit of a market, especially if you're not a leading player, you've got to recognise that early on, that even if you've got the best product, you might not get selected.
Correct. But the way then that becomes more about the individual. So the guy leading the sale. Because you're never going to beat the IBM for credibility on the company. Okay, you're never going to beat them necessarily. Bear in mind, IBM very rarely have the best product. And I'd say that as Cisco as well, and definitely of Cisco. Cisco do not have the best products in the market by a lot.
And yet they're phenomenally successful, right?
Oh, they're a bit like IBM. Their marketing, their sales and marketing arm is immense. The way that they educate the market and say what they say into the market to get their people.
They're thought leaders, aren't they?
They're definitely thought leaders, but that doesn't make the products or services the best, because, you know, sorry if there's anybody listening from those organisations.
The lawyers in their production room are twitching.
But if you're an organisation, a mid-tier organisation that's looking for specific functionality or specific service and the way it's done, then absolutely you can be a disruptor.
So what tips would you give to someone then who didn't work for one of the big companies that might get chosen by default? How would you break into something? Well,
you break into it through hard yards. It's called, you've just got to be relentless. There is no other way. I was once dealing with BAE Systems down in Bristol, and they were outsourced, all their technology was outsourced to CSC. So every time I saw an executive on the car park, literally I doorstepped them on the car park, because I knew they had problems with their SAP system, and said, look, we will give you a consultant for free to analyse what your problems are.
Right.
And it's just relentless.
And it still took a while, right?
It still took a while. The guy still eventually said, all right, well, he pass you 3 levels down the chain, obviously, just investigate what they're saying. Yeah. So you then become credible, and then you get bumped up the chain. But that relentless nature of sales is the only way to succeed year on year, decade on decade. If you just try and do one sale once 1 year and be a hero,
live off
great.
Yeah.
Right, but if you want to earn your commission every year, it's being relentless.
So how would you think, that's good advice on the big companies then, and you said when I asked the question about whether it's the person, the product or the company, and you said certainly in larger companies it's probably dominated by the company. How would that vary for a small company?
For a small company, they need agility. So quite often they've had experience of big companies, and if they've got a problem, for instance, with Microsoft Office or whatever, then they go into a ticketing system that can take many days to get sorted out.
We all know those, right?
And call centres that go on forever. So what they need is somebody they can phone, and there's somebody who's going to sort their problem right there and then, because their business needs that level of agility, and they're not a BP who, if their photocopier breaks, they know there's another one on the next floor so they can just walk up and down to it. So that's not quite so important. But obviously for a smaller company, in the photocopier example, if you've got a photocopier and it stops working and you need to print a document, you're doomed.
Yeah.
So it's different things for different people.
Right, and from the point of view of the person involved, do you think, given that often when you sell a product, you then hand over at the point of closing a sale to the delivery people, do you think that matters too much if you build a really strong relationship with the salesperson, given that you just then don't speak to them again after the sale?
Yeah, the salesman, you can never, I'd say what you just said was not true. You do hand it over to the delivery side, but I personally never lose contact with the senior people in their contacts, because they always need to know that they can phone somebody, and that somebody being me would sort it out. I've had calls, we all get calls at 5 o'clock on a Friday. A lot of naive salesmen ignore them. I always see it as an opportunity to fix a problem and become a hero. And when you're a big friend to companies, they give you more money.
And you stand out then.
Correct.
So if you've got a territory that you're responsible for and it's maybe got 200, 300, 400 companies in it or whatever, I see quite often maybe it's inevitable, but sales guys tend to default to just talking to the noisy ones, the ones that tend to give the work most recently. So they're looking at the live deals they're negotiating at the moment, maybe the recently won ones, maybe new opportunities, but they don't seem to work very well down the Pareto tail a bit, just to keep in touch with the others on a nurturing just in case basis. Did you do that, or did you also?
Well, that's the less successful salesman, absolutely.
Right.
So you're always looking what I call over the horizon selling. So you're always, even though you're measured quarterly or annually, you're always looking over the horizon to next year and the year after. So whether that's inviting those people, the long tail, to events, or whether it's just occasionally emailing with them an update, knowing that they either haven't got a budget this year or they've got a project this year, is key to winning the sale.
You put the hard yards in then. You made sure that even when there wasn't something that was going to hit your monthly or even quarterly or even perhaps this year's target, you're always trying to sow the seeds for the future
Always.
years.
And that is the only way. It's obviously everybody's heard about sales funnel, right? Keeping that sales funnel filled is the most important.
But even that top of funnel, which is really high up top of funnel stuff, that's a long way away from fruition.
Yeah, but if you don't do it, your competitors are going to do it.
So when you've got into more sales management positions, how do you deal with sales guys that tend to aim very short term, get this month or quarterly's target in, and then take the foot off the gas, because then they think, if I do anything now, I don't want to go and overachieve because I need to start filling up my next quarter's pipeline. How do you break that mindset?
Well, first of all, breaking the mindset is really difficult, because you can teach sales. I can teach people to be salesmen, but what you can't teach is those basic things, being on time. You can't teach enthusiasm. You can't teach all of those different, to be humble, be attentive, all the things that you need with a customer. You can't teach. There's usually something on LinkedIn every week or two on the characteristics of what everybody can do without any knowledge. I can't remember what the full list are.
Yeah.
But if you do all those basic things, I mean, some people, believe it or not, and I know a lot of C-level people, don't even call them back.
Right, it's incredible to think of, isn't it?
It's scary. So I always found I didn't have to be a salesman. I just had to be polite and phone people back.
Be a normal human being.
Just be a normal, attentive human being, and you are winning the race at the beginning. And that doesn't matter who you work for, as in whether it's a big, large multinational like Cisco or it's a small partner, or what product it is. If you can just be a normal person to people, then it goes a long way.
And presumably that applies as much as whether you're in a business development role or an account management role, but they're two very different roles within sales, aren't they? I don't know which one you spent most time in, or whether you did a bit of both.
I spent most of my time in new business sales. People kept promoting me to managers and directors, and usually got out of them quite quickly.
Really?
Because you realise, I think to your previous question, right, there are a lot of people who think you've got to be, to be a salesman, you've got to be the smartest guy in the room. They believe you've got to know all the answers, and it's completely the opposite. All you're doing is managing a relationship. And like I say, seeing all the youngsters come through, as it were, who want to be the smartest guy in the room and know everything and be able to do every deal is the wrong approach.
Does that cover product knowledge as well? You say
no, I think, well, yes and no. Having some product knowledge is key. Yeah. But actually, if you think about a sales process, going into a first new business meeting with a customer and him asking you a question about a widget or a service level or whatever it is, and you not knowing the answer, is a great opportunity to communicate with them again. So whether that's sending them a follow-up email where you can sneak in other messages than the answer that they asked, question they asked, or better still, getting a second meeting where you bring a subject matter expert, and again, you can explain in more detail whatever it is you're trying to do.
And did you notice over this long career you've had, there must have been changes in the way people sell, the way people buy? I mean, people are still people, right? But the communication technologies we use don't fax each other anymore and stuff like that. I'm wondering also whether there's a change now where younger people who are buying and maybe even selling don't use the phone as much. They want to do everything
and I think
online.
that's the most frustrating thing in the world for all of us, which is the younger generation, first of all, start only replying on email, so they don't use the phone, and they do it through social media. But again, I'm just helping a friend of mine with his business, and we just do networking meetings because we find that personal contact works every time. So being referred by either finding opportunities or being referred by somebody in that room means that it's a warm, hot lead, and away you go.
That's a good tip for the networking meetings if your market is in the room. I used to work in more manufacturing and industrial stuff, and as a buyer, I would never have gone to networking meetings, so nobody trying to sell to me would have ever found me there. So you've got to somehow get into me, get in my face, get a meeting, get a phone call even, and I'm not going to be putting myself out to be found. So how do you get into those people?
So there's a firm called, if you work for Rackspace. I didn't do this. Okay. There's a Rackspace as a hosting company down in London where I found one of my friends or contacts used to work there. Yeah. So I phoned her up, asked who the technical manager was who looked after a certain area was, and then again, stalked him, approached him directly that I could come and present a competitive view at one of his team meetings.
Right. This is by phone, you mean?
By email and by phone, but
yeah.
by convincing him that actually he needed somebody to, like I say, present a different view on his security devices. And he took me in. Obviously, this great opportunity for me to present to his whole team an alternative for what they've got. And within 3-6 months, they'd started buying ours as a second security product. But not because I knew him, but it's the store. It's that relentless nature to get through to the right person.
But you're also offering something of value, right? That was what's unusual about that offer.
Yeah, it is something of value. But in that case, the thing that appealed to him is he just needed somebody interested in his team meeting.
Okay, so it wasn't the content per se.
No. It wasn't. He didn't know what the content was we were going to give him. He just thought
he had boring team meetings and wanted another voice.
Boring team meetings, have somebody to talk at his team meeting.
That was just luck, right? That was what got you in.
Yeah, I think luck is always. But I don't know which clever person said this. The harder you work, the luckier you get, right? Yeah. So I think that more often that you knock on doors, I think cold callers will tell you. I think it's every 5 or 10 dials they finally get through to somebody who will actually have a conversation with them.
And would you have done that yourself in the past, or did you have somebody else bashing the doors down and passing them over?
Yeah, regularly we had somebody who was targeted. We had an internal cold caller who would call people just daily. The problem with those meetings, as the problem with agencies, there's a lot of agencies for 400 quid will get you a meeting with a C-level person at wherever. Yeah. And when you get to those meetings, I would say 9 out of 10 of them have very little value. They're usually somebody who's a mid-manager, wants to be important sort of guy.
Happy to have the chat.
Yeah, who may somewhere be an extended project group who's involved in a certain project, but he has no influence. Yeah. Directly. So those meetings I'd say, little value.
Yeah. So how do you coach your cold callers then to be able to give you higher value meetings?
You just accept that it's 1 in 10.
Right, okay. So you just have to kiss a lot of frogs.
You just have to accept that. The other thing is you always have got an extended network of people who work for you, with you. As I say, it's just relentless stalking, really.
Yeah.
So you have to, I know, so a bit like the example I just drew with Rackspace, find somebody I know.
Yeah.
Or you have to identify a problem like I did with the SAP system at BA. You find out they've got a problem with it, and then you try to get somebody to listen to your story.
So it sounds like you had a pretty well-developed sense of your targets. You knew who you wanted to sell to.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say you knew who you don't never know who you're going to sell to in a corporation, because they've all got fancy
Not the person
titles.
within it, but the company.
Yeah, the company.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the target
I always
account.
had so when you talk about a territory like you mentioned there, say the West Midlands has got 200 customers in it, I'd typically have 20 customers. So when you're a new business salesman, you were typically given, say, 20 customers, and you were told to go, because at that stage they were always told you that they were warm customers who were still buying things.
These are prospects, they're not yet buying
Well,
off
they're
you.
barely prospects, to be
Right.
honest.
So not even customers then, they're just names on a list, really.
Names on a list, very much.
But
so.
when you talk about being relentless, unlike some others where they just have a long list of people to call on the cold calls, they call them once, maybe don't even get through, move on to the next one, you would have a group that you'd keep going back round, keep finding other innovative ways of getting into them.
Whether it's inviting them to a seminar or more often nowadays, obviously it's online meeting of some
webinar
sort.
chat.
The best one we got to get a C-level person was invite them to, over COVID, to a wine tasting online. So to get to these people, you have to use creative ways as well to get into them. But as soon as you've got into them, they're just normal people. They're just normal people
who like all the rest of us. Yeah.
They're the same as the rest of us, but they're put on a plateau by a lot of people.
Well, they're also guarded by gatekeepers, aren't they? So it's harder to get
Yeah, and that's what has changed to go to your point, is the fact that 20 years ago, core selling time is between 8 and 9, because you knew the gatekeeper wasn't in.
Clever.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
And core selling time again is 12 till 1, 2 o'clock when the
Lunchtimes.
gatekeeper's not in, and after 5 o'clock when the gatekeeper's not there.
Right.
So
what did you do during the other parts of the day?
Well, no. The other during the day, a lot of people get lost nowadays, especially the youngsters, because you get in and they start doing that. The first thing they do is their email. Then the next thing they do is go and have a coffee and speak to somebody. And say that's 8:30, 9 o'clock till 10 o'clock, and they haven't done anything.
Yeah, well, they could spend all day doing their emails.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure many of them do.
So how did you structure your day then?
Well, get in early, core selling time. So if I needed to be in London and start work, or Leeds or wherever, I'd create a forward operating base. At latest, I'd be at my desk, which was sometimes McDonald's in Leeds or Euston Station by 8 o'clock.
Right.
And then I would do whatever outbound calls or things I had to do then go on and do my meeting. Same at lunchtime, same after 5 o'clock. It's all about, like I say, putting yourself in the right place, and what does a guy who maybe is not going to be as successful do? He would spend all Monday morning travelling to Houston, have a meeting at 2 o'clock until 3 o'clock, and that's his day.
Yeah. So you really are giving out the message here that you don't get anything for nothing. You've got to put the effort in. You've got to get up early in the morning. You've got to do those calls at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon when you're looking to clock off.
Yeah.
You've got to prepare. You've got to be diligent and keep bashing down the door. When do you finally give up on a target then? It's easy, right?
There is no... So go back to funnel management, right? So the idea over horizon selling funnel management is all about making sure you've got enough opportunities that are going to come in that quarter or month or year that are going to do your target. Sometimes you're lucky and you get some big ones and they make your target a lot smaller. Sometimes you just about get to your target. I know the activity levels that you need to do that. So, and the activity is... Once you've finished your quarter at 5 o'clock and you've closed the $1 million deals and you're here and everybody's patting you on the back, and when do you next speak to your boss? And my answer was 7:30 on Monday morning, because I would then be travelling to my next customer meeting on the first day of the quarter. And I've had a number of managers said to me, Steve, could you just not call me at 8:30 on a Monday morning? And I had one when I worked at Cisco. He used to have a moratorium of 8 o'clock. He said, Steve, don't call me before 8 o'clock. And I had one at HP, Hewlett Packard, that said, "Don't call me till after 9 o'clock." Believe it or not.
That didn't suit your way of working at all.
I just believe the early bird gets the worm, sort of thing.
And in all the jobs you've had, do you prefer being an at-the-coalface salesperson, or did you like the managerial roles where you managed other sales?
The problem with managerial roles is that, as you've said, is that getting that message to people, understanding, and the organisation. Everybody can sell. Everybody sells. The marketing people can sell, the managing director can sell, the sales director, the sales manager, they can all sell and all got different views on how it is. And it is, when you're in management, trying to convince people to do the basic things is very, very difficult.
Like pushing water uphill sometimes. So would you rather just do it yourself and maybe be an example? If others wanted to follow your example, then fill the boots. But if not, that's their lookout. They do their own thing. You
try to drive standards into companies because, skill set training is key, right? Especially for people who are, but the more than skill set, it's time management, as I've just alluded to.
Can you teach time management?
That's the thing. You can't teach time management.
No.
So I always describe it as the latest time I get to a meeting is on time. That is the latest I get there.
That means you're late in your mind.
It might,
too tight.
Yeah. And you know my brother as well, and he's sort of the same thing. Latest thing is you're on time.
So that's very much an attitude that perhaps you even have from a very young age, isn't it? Can you,
very much.
Can you not teach that?
I had a tough paper round, so that's where you learn to get up early. But I'll give you the example. So when I first went into sales, probably in sales 2 or 3 years, new business sales, as I say, knocking doors down. At the end of the year, the sales director put up the stats of who was the highest earner in revenue, and it was me. And then he moved on to the next slide, and the next slide was how many new business meetings he'd had.
Right.
And I had twice as many meetings as anybody else.
No shit, Sherlock. There's a link.
And you just realise at that stage there is a direct link between how many people you see, and because if you don't see them, how can you influence them? Yeah. How can you create a relationship?
Well, that's what, as I said earlier, when I see these sales guys that focus on the ones that they think they're going to get the business from, rather than speaking to their territory as a whole. Even if you've got 400, you're not going to get around them all every year. But at least make sure you've spoken, or at least sent an email once every 6 months, a year, and maybe visited them once every couple of years, if not more frequent. And I don't get it why people don't do that more.
Don't know. But as I say, you keep going back to the word relentless. If you just want to do your target in 1 year and just be a hero in 1 year, then you can wait. You can work on one account.
But then you'd see those guys moving on between companies, right? They have a flash in the pan, and then they have to move on and do the same flash somewhere else.
This is going to make you laugh. They usually moved into management.
Okay, yeah.
Straight up.
Yeah.
So that is probably one of the bigger frustrations in sales, is that salesmen who've done one deal because they're in the right place at the right time immediately become a manager of some sort.
How would you advise an MD then, who has some superstar salespeople who are good at uncovering opportunities, solution selling and closing, and the temptation is to move them into a management position, which is, of course, when you lose your best salesperson, right? How would you advise them to structure their department differently?
Well, first of all, I'd get them to, if they wanted to move somebody into sales management, I'd get them to go on a management training course.
Right.
I know it sounds
general management.
Just management. It doesn't have to be a sales management. Just so that motivation that you need to recognise in good people. This time, and more specifically, what is your role? Your role in all the companies I've worked for the last 30 years. If you go and sit down and do a review, right, the sales manager, sales director, MD are all sitting in the room, and they've all got an opinion on how the sales should be done, and what if you go into the military or people on sales management. They will nurture you as an individual, or you and your mini team, because there's usually a mini team, on how to approach it, use the company resources the best. How can we help you, rather than
different approach,
than tell you what to do.
Yeah, and beat you up on the numbers.
I think I listened to a podcast called 13 Minutes to the Moon when the moon landing.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah,
and they talk about the management style there, which is very much when they went to the hierarchies to ask them what a best approach was when there was a problem. The hierarchy came back with, how can we help you?
Right. Yeah.
Right. Not trying to tell, you're the experts. You've sat down and done all the work. You've run all the numbers on Apollo 13 that as we know, had the big problem when it was heading towards the moon.
Yeah.
And they say, you've got it, so it's not for us to make a decision.
So get out of the way, really. Let the experts
get out of the way.
Support them.
But support them.
Yeah.
Definitely.
What do you think is the biggest lesson you learned in your career in sales?
The biggest lesson I thought is that I thought my sales career was going to end after about a year or 2 years because all items become commodity, right? So if you want to earn money, you've got to go into the new specialist area. Example, 25 years ago, I sold a terabyte of storage for £1 million.
No way.
£1 million, right? And we had specialist storage teams that run around the UK selling £1 million worth of terabytes.
I can get that on my key ring now for 20 quid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So there's everything becomes a commodity. Laptops become more commodity, data centers become more commodity because they're all Microsoft now, not Unix and the like. So I didn't realize that early in my sales career that, well, just go and find another specialist area. So I've been in cybersecurity for the last 10 years because that was the highest paying area, and that's where they need a high.
Will that ever become a commodity?
I think it is already, but there's so much FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt that everybody's still putting out there.
Yeah.
You
still sell on that.
Yeah. I mean, if you fundamentally do the right training, it's a bit like a fire drill. In the company, how many times do you have a cybersecurity attack drill?
Yeah.
How often do you do that? But you have a fire drill every month.
Yeah. Well, you should do.
So you should do? Why wouldn't you have a ransomware attack every month?
Yeah. See how you respond.
See how you respond.
Yeah.
And also see how your employees respond to a spearphishing email which says sign this and you get a big pay rise. Guess what? 25% of people still click on the email.
Still do it, even though they've been trained not to.
Well, I wouldn't go as far as they've been trained, but definitely 25% of people don't recognise it.
Yeah, they do. And the other thing I'm interested in from your experience is you get massive highs when you win a big deal. Maybe your £1 million for your terabyte is an example of that. But they're matched with massive lows as well, and you feel that you should have won a deal and it doesn't go your way. How do you cope with that amazing sort of roller coaster of emotions?
Alcohol is obviously one, but the other one is it's a sad world, right? That I lived in for the last 10 years because you didn't get high when things went really well, and therefore you didn't get low when things went really low.
Really?
And it's actually re-engaging with the world that that if something good happens, you should celebrate it more. So when you work for a big corporate, it's almost the king is dead, long live the king. So at the end of the quarter of the year, you'd done your number. You came back literally on that Monday morning or the 1st of January.
All forgotten.
Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Nobody
all
cares.
All over again.
What happened last quarter. It's all about the future.
So just knowing that is partly how you make yourself robust for it. You build a resilience to cope with the fact that you're going to get knocked back sometimes. You're going to lose deals that you thought you were nailed on to get. It's just life.
In new business sales, the biggest thing is rejection, right? Individual rejection. So you get rejected all the time, whether that's because you feel you are, because your boss is giving you a big target or is reducing your customer list or you've lost a deal, whatever. Living in the world of a brand new logo, new business salesman. That's rejection's tough. The biggest thing.
So it's only suited to certain types of people.
Yeah, I would say that the average life expectancy of a new business salesman in most of the companies I work for is 1 or 2 years.
Have you had to recruit sales guys, and do you have a killer interview question to filter out the wannabes with the ones that have really got it?
Not now. I'm getting a lot better with it because I've been helping people recruit firms over the last two years, and that is cultural fit. I never quite understood why everybody felt it was so important, and I now understand why it's so important. Being a good salesman, you can teach people to be a good salesman. You can teach people to do a lot of things, but culturally fitting in with the organisation. And I don't mean gender, or I don't mean any discrimination in any way. What I mean is, are they as an individual a nice person?
Yeah.
Are they enthusiastic? Are they keen to get on?
Infectious, maybe.
Infectious, yeah. Depending on the role you're trying to recruit for, because obviously you're trying to... My dad was an accountant, so sorry, accountants. If you're an accountant and you're sitting there, that's a really important job, right? And running around the office popping champagne corks may not be
not the right type.
Thing. However, if you're the business development manager and you're, in marketing, and you have got to be seen to be that bubbly, go get 'em sort of person popping champagne corks. That doesn't mean to anybody in either of those disciplines that that's you can't be a bubbly, happy champagne popper as an accountant, because you can. But I'm just saying.
Time and place, cultural fit. If you had your time again, would you still go into a career in sales?
Probably not.
You thought about that?
No, I think about it because I started in engineering at GK and Defence, welding tanks, and then using their CNC machines. And that is a whole lot more interesting. The problem is,
it doesn't pay as well. No.
And in sales,
it's a sad fact, isn't it? If you're chasing the money, you're going to be tempted by sales, whether it's right for you or not.
Yeah, well, my daughter's had a go at it, my nephew's had a go at it, and it didn't really work out.
Not for everyone.
No.
So if someone went into it then as a youngster now, and they're still working out themselves and they don't know yet whether they're suited or not, what's the best piece of advice you can give them?
Give it a go. Got to give it a go.
Okay.
Just to see what it entails. Because, as I say, everybody at all ages thinks they're a salesman or could do it. It's like any lesson in life. If you think there's something interesting, whether it's money that interested you or travelling around the UK or internationally or whatever it is, just give it a go. The only true way of finding out is give it a go.
Now, I know that following this podcast, I'm going to meet several people that listen to it. Believe it or not, we do have the odd listener here and there, and some of them are in sales roles, and they're going to say, that was a really interesting chat you had with Steve. But I think there's going to be a sort of a subtext which says, but I'm already a salesman. I've already done this for 10, 20 years. I know it all. What sort of advice could you give someone like that who's doing okay, but they're not the standard that you're describing as being excellent? How do you get them to see that there's an even better way?
Well, understand how much money you have to put in your pension for starters to
That's
retire.
Scary enough.
Because if you haven't, if you want to do the calculation on your pension now and how much you need in there and how much savings to live at the current level, that if you're in sales now, you're already on a bonus-related income. So at your current level of outgoings, just start thinking about how much money you need to put in. And if you're already over the line, I suggest you get out as soon as you can. But I suggest if you don't know, if you're not over the line, then I think you're going to find it's more than you think. And I am not, a pension salesman in any way.
Advice, no.
It's not financial advice in any way. But that is the biggest thing.
So money, if you're going into it for the money, then money becomes the driver.
Yeah, definitely. But then there are people, like say, who choose to go the management route, and if you can go up the slippery pole of management to management, and then director or however that looks, and go up your corporation, it's definitely a way into the higher levels of management. You just have to be a bit more patient and a lot more political. Yeah,
interesting, isn't it? Do you think there's an art to sales? Is it a thing of beauty when you get it right?
I think it's something that can definitely be taught. I think, but there's no art to just being personable. There's no art.
That's your message,
manners.
Isn't it? There's being a nice person, turning up on time, doing your research, following through any promises. It's a lot of basics that you think are almost too obvious to need saying, but they aren't too obvious. They need saying.
I would go as far as, 1 in 2 of my sales has been won just on that basis.
Fascinating.
Just being somebody who replies to emails or calls or, like I say, the biggest one is cold callers because they talk your ears off, right? And the problem that salesmen, even in B2B sales, if they've got a reason to speak to a customer, they won't just give them the answer, what colour was that switch? Or you phone up, say it's blue, it's blue and it'd be great for you. Put the phone down. You don't have to then go and give them war and peace on the fact that you've now got 10 different switch settings and you've got, they just want the answer.
Yeah.
So give them the answer, move on and wait for the opportunity to do the bigger sell. But a lot of people, for some reason, try to repeat their whole value proposition every time they speak to a customer.
Programmed into it, yeah. What a shame.
Is very annoying to many people.
Well, Steve, that's been really inspirational. Thank you very much. And I mean that. Thank you very much for coming in again. And I'm sure I'm going to get some great reaction from people listening to the podcast. It's always interesting when you get guests in to get a very different perspective to ours. And with so much experience to give you that perspective, it's been really interesting to see how you answered some of those questions. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for having me. It's good fun to revisit my sales career.
Yeah, and I know that now you're hardly retired, you're helping others, and also you do quite a bit of voluntary work for the local search and rescue, don't you? And your drone pilot, fundraiser, and all
yeah, well, I think
so.
that, again, listening to the podcasts and reading the books I do for life, for living longer and living happier, right, you have to keep yourself active. So it's not just about the exercise that you and I do for VO2 max and weights, it is all about keeping your brain ticking over as well.
Your brain active as well. Brilliant. Well, there's good inspiration there for everybody listening, whatever age you are. Keep active, keep your mind active, and listen to some of those lessons that Steve talked about. Brilliant. Thanks, Steve. That's great. Thanks. And thank you for listening to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow. As we say each week, we're trying to come up with something interesting or useful for owners and managers of small and medium-sized enterprises. So I hope you enjoyed that one. And if you did, please pass on the word. Just send someone an email with a link in it, or do a follow on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your stuff. And in the meantime, good luck with your business.